Hey guys! Hopefully you guys can all see me and that it looks normal. I don't know if it is. It looks normal on my end. So um, first off, we're doing our part 3 of Kick the Sick. And so today what we're talking about, sore throats. And if I look funny, like I said, it doesn't look funny on my end, but maybe it does on your end. So sore throats, super common that we see with kids and adults alike. It's one of those things that when they get a cold, oftentimes they do have the sore throat. So we really want to talk to you guys about viral versus bacterial and when you should be concerned. So I am sideways. Okay, let's see. Does that help? Now I look weird, right? Should I stand up? That's weird because it looks normal on the computer that I'm using. So I haven't used this one before. Okay, so first off, awesome, it worked. Okay, so if you're watching live, you guys let us know that you're watching live. And then if you're watching the recording, let us know that you're watching the recording. So make a little comment in the bottom. So thank you, Erica, for letting me know. Like I said, I'm on a different computer this time because my phone's not working for it. So trial and error. The biggest thing today, you guys, I want you to gather the information. Really what we're talking about is probably going to be a totally different way of thinking about sore throats today. And so I debated, I have gone back and changed what I'm talking about, how I'm talking about it, and ultimately I did go deeper into strep throat because that is the biggest concern. So I'm going to talk a lot about strep throat. But first off, so I'm sorry that I'm a little off-centered, but oh well. I want to talk mostly about viral and bacterial infections. I've gotten my notes in front of me just to make sure I'm giving you guys all the right information when it comes to sore throats. But we also want to talk about when to be worried, so that way when you guys are making your decisions, how to take care of this, it's not based on fear. That's the biggest thing, because so often we are making decisions for ourselves, for our kids, all based on fear and not sometimes facts and knowledge. So let's get into more of viral infections when it comes to sore throats. Sore throats can be caused by a lot of different things. Yes, we can get sore throats even from screaming, from, let's see, dryness in the winter air, things like that. But let's delve deep into the viral component. So most sore throats, you guys, they are going to be caused by viruses. And so if it's a virus, it's going to have a gradual onset over a day or two. Symptoms to watch for are going to be that tingling sensation around the soft palate, so back of the throat, which you start to notice with swallowing. This is like the biggest thing. I know sometimes all of a sudden you're good one time that you're taking a drink of water and the next swallow you're like, oh, I start to feel a little bit of that tingling, like that sore throat is coming on, right? So within a day or two, that's when the sore throat is going to develop, and it's oftentimes accompanied by things like the runny nose, which is usually really clear, watery. Do want to make sure I mention that. You might get a mild fever, coughing, swollen neck glands, all typically is going to indicate a viral sore throat, okay? So if it's a viral sore throat, know that we obviously know if it's virus, there's no treatment, no cure, right? It has to run its course. This is so important. Viral, you make comfortable, but there's no treatment. There is no cure for it. We all know this, right? So if, however, those symptoms do last longer than a week, or you get the respiratory difficulty with it, definitely seek medical attention, you guys. There's nothing wrong with taking it in and just making sure that it is a viral infection or something that just needs to run its course. So now we get into more of the bacterial infection, like the strep. And so that's typically, you guys, it's gonna emerge, it's gonna come on really quickly, often within a few hours. They usually will have a high fever, not just a mild fever. They're gonna have the swollen lymph glands under the jaw, and extreme pain in that throat. You might not have any other symptoms like cold symptoms that we talked about with the viral infection. So you may not have the cough and the runny nose, But here are the 3 things to look for. And so that any parent can look in their kid's throat and you're going to be able to see this. So it makes the diagnosis a little bit easier for you guys. First of all, there's going to be pus on the tonsils and in the throat. So normally a pink throat, it's going to appear red with spots of white or yellow, and it often looks like cottage cheese. The second thing you're going to look for, swollen glands in the neck, and then the temp is over 103. So those are some three symptoms, signs to look for that will indicate more of a bacterial infection when it comes to the sore throat. So the other thing that I want to talk about strep throat, so we're going to delve deep into this because we have a lot of fear around strep throat. I know growing up, it was always you didn't want to have strep throat. You had to be on an antibiotic, all these things. But if you guys do not have this book, like get this book. I reference it all the time, just because I feel like there's so much that we get. There's so much education we get in school, and this is the same with medical doctors. There's tons of information, things like that we get a lot of textbook stuff, and then we go into the real world, and sometimes we discover some different things. And he is a pediatrician that wrote the book, so he talks a lot about his experience and what he found being in practice and what really worked. So a couple things that I want to talk about with the fear around strep throat. A lot of times, sometimes people have the fear, but they don't really understand why there's the fear around strep throat. They just know it's something bad in a sense. So the fear with strep throat is that if it's left untreated, you're going to get things like the acute nephritis, or the biggest thing is, right, rheumatic fever. That's what we were always taught, like growing up. I remember hearing about that. And therefore lifelong heart disease. So he talks so much about this, and I am taking a lot of this now from his book because I think it's super important that you guys get a different view, a different paradigm of thinking, because ultimately when we have strep throat, there's people who are constantly being treated for strep throat and they get it over and over and over again. So he talks a lot about how taking a culture can oftentimes be a waste of money and time, and that's because it doesn't prove that they necessarily have strep throat or don't have strep throat. Those cultures don't prove that they do or don't, depending on when they take it and things like that. Like you get false positives, false negatives, all that stuff. Instead, he states that the physical examination that we just talked about, those 3 things to look for, the pus and the fever and the swollen glands, that is really that is satisfactory to determine if it is strep. And he also says that an average of 20% of perfectly healthy children will carry strep bacteria in their throats all winter long, but they don't develop the disease because of the natural immunity their systems have developed, which I think is really important. So you might culture these kids and whatnot, but they don't have any symptoms. They don't even have a sore throat, nothing. The other thing too that I want to mention is that if your child is younger than 4 years old, he oftentimes says that you can't rely on the examination. So if they're under 4, you can't rely on the examination, and a throat culture might be able to determine if strep is present. However, children under 4 don't get rheumatic fever. So he actually recommends, not doing a culture because of that. If they're under 4, they can't get rheumatic fever. And so he's like, what does it matter even if it is positive? So what are the chances that your child will experience rheumatic fever, say, if they do have strep? So he, in his book, stated, so he worked in a pediatric practice for 25 years, pediatrician. They saw about 10,000 patient contacts a year, and he only saw 1 case of rheumatic fever. And he says that typically the rheumatic fever, it's not going to exist except for in populations where like children are really malnourished. It's like more of extreme poverty, and they're living in very overcrowded conditions and things like that. So he was just not something he just never really saw. And I think that that's really important because, like I said, textbook versus experience can be 2 different things that we're learning from. So let's assume that we do have a case of strep. He often states that it will respond within 24 to 48 hours with antibiotics if that's what you choose to do. But without antibiotics, it's usually going to disappear in less than a week. So the antibiotics simply just speed the process up. And I know for us as parents, sometimes we want that process sped up because we have to get to work. But he talks, and I'm not going to talk in depth about this, but he does go into more detail about why, if you're doing that antibiotic, or why, if you're treating it that initial time, why you will see the recurrence of the strep throat often. So you'll hear of people having strep throat multiple times a year. And he goes into a lot of detail about why that is. So I don't want to go into that here. But if that's the route that you choose to take, know that there are some consequences in that as well. Different way of thinking, okay? If symptoms do persist for more than a week, you do want to take them in. And this is, you guys, this is viral or bacterial. You want to take them in if it's more than that week that they're having those symptoms, because you want to rule out a third source of sore throats. And that can be things like the mono, diphtheria, which we don't really see, or leukemia. I don't go into depth into that at all, but I do want to say that. So if it's lasting longer than the week, take them in. Sometimes it's just peace of mind, right? So people will often ask us, what do we do then if our kid has a sore throat? And a couple things that I do want to mention, you guys, is I grew up in a house that my mom is a registered nurse. And so I don't think growing up, I don't remember ever going in for a sore throat and having my throat swabbed. Ever. I don't ever remember that. I don't know if any of us had strep throat. I'd have to ask her. None of my kids have ever had strep throat. So this stuff works. It works, like taking this approach to it. And I would highly encourage you to read this book. It is so easy. You can go right to, hey, sore throats. Let's read about that. But here's what we do. We always do adjustments. We always do adjustments first. Upper cervicals, all connected into the ear, nose, throat. But we want to give our body that boost. We want to increase and enhance that immune system. And that's what, by getting that nervous system functioning the best that it can, it gives the immune system that extra support. So adjustments are always number one in our book. Second, hydrate. Lots and lots of fluids. The other thing too is sometimes the warm fluids, right, are so much easier to consume. So whether it's chamomile tea, things like that, we do a lot of warm water even. The other thing, I don't even have it written down, but we do a lot of bone broth in our house. So I make a lot of homemade bone broth, and I use that all the time, especially in the winter when I'm making soups. Homemade bone broth is so good for so many reasons, but having some bone broth can be amazing for those sore throats. And last but not least, rest. Tons and tons of sleep. So as soon as our kids start getting a sore throat, it's like, you're not doing anything, you're gonna rest, because your body only has so much energy to devote to all the things that it's gonna do. So if you're resting and you're not going and stay to school takes a lot of energy. It's a lot of emotional energy. It's a lot of focusing that they have to do. That means that you're taking energy away from that immune system to work on all this stuff, and it's focusing on that. We don't want that. We want them to sleep so that that body has tons of energy to work on healing up that sore throat, engaging that immune system as much as it can, and getting them better. So a lot of times people ask, what do you do for all these different things? We adjust, we hydrate, we sleep. Don't worry about right now for moms and dads, like you have to take off work. Because if you do the hard work now, you're gonna miss a whole lot less work in the future, because otherwise kids are constantly getting sick. The whole reason why we're doing this series is so that we're not constantly in that cycle of sickness all the time, because we see it, we hear about it all the time in the office. They're sick, they're sick, they're sick. You hear about it on Facebook, they're sick all the time. People are constantly calling in sick to work because they have a sick kid. If you don't want that, if you want your kids' health to be different, you got to start doing something different, and you got to start approaching it differently. So like I said, it may not be the way that you've always thought about sore throats or coughs like I did last week. It's a different way of looking at health and looking at sickness. So hope you guys found it interesting. Make sure you like, comment on it, share. If you have questions, definitely put them in the comments. We'll try and answer them as soon as we can. But share this if you know somebody who has been struggling with sore throats or their kids are struggling with strep throat. Encourage them to watch this video. And this book, you guys, you can get it on Amazon. Like, it's such a great resource to have around, especially when those things do hit, those symptoms. It's like, am I thinking about this correctly? And you want to make sure that you have that resource handy for when the time comes. So thanks for tuning in, you guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye.